Code of the Samurai, Code of the Bats, all the same thing. Batman Ninja. I have fallen a little bit behind on the DC animated properties, but I'm working on it now, and let's talk about this thing. When I first heard about this, I kind of cocked my head and went, what? And then I heard that at least some of the people who did Afro Samurai, which is a show I love, I need to do that as either an animation junkie or why it's awesome at some point down the road. We're working on it in sort of the design and conceptual stages, and then I saw the first trailer, was like, maybe, and that first trailer was in Japanese, and then I saw the first trailer with the English voice, and I was like, maybe not. So having now actually seen it, it's worth seeing. It's worth seeing at least once, and the reason to see it is the visuals. The story is it's pretty much exactly what you would think it would be based off the pitch. And, you know, there's the voice work. I'll come back to that. So, and I've also got nitpicks. But you know what? Let's talk about what works. Visually, this is really good most of the time. By that I mean the design work, all the reimaginings of these Batman characters as feudal Japanese characters, you know, as ninjas, as samurai, as feudal lords, you know, all these things, and not just Batman and villains, like Batman and villains and allies, like a ton of characters get this redesign treatment. They look really good, like really cool. So all that is love it. So that's all really good. The action scenes are great. They're high energy. They are dynamic. They're intense. The hits feel big. It's really well done action. The non-action scenes are a little bit more iffy, and that's basically kind of a given with the animation approach they went with. What they did, I'm not sure if they actually still call it this. It's a bit more advanced than, you know, from when this term first turned around, but it's a bit like cell shading. So what we're looking at are 3D models, but they have kind of 2D sort of they're sort of painted over to look like 2D cells. And when they're in serious motion and in action, they look great. When characters are just standing around talking, they look awkward and often kind of expressionless. And I mean, part of that might be a stylistic choice, but like, unless they're doing like big things, you don't get a lot of emotion out of these faces. I do think it is something to do with the animation style, because I've seen that other times I've seen this technique used. There's something about subtle facial, you know, expressions and indicators of emotions and thought processes that just don't read well. They look like puppets, like marionette puppets. So, you know, so that's not great. The voice work, some of it's good. They've got Tara Strong as Harley Quinn. She's always good. Most of the supporting cast is decent. Batman is bland, but he's also written super bland. The writing in general actually isn't very good. Now, I'll point out at this point, I watched the dubbed version. The rental copy unfortunately didn't have the Japanese with subtitles option. I could see the subtitles like from the original Japanese, so I could see how the translation was different. And I did that for a little bit just to like get a sense of it, but I didn't have the option on the rental copy to see it with the Japanese voices, and I that might have been better. It might have helped, but the American voices, Batman, yeah, he's super bland, but you know, the character is also written to be that way. He's not got a lot going on. He doesn't lean that heavily into the setting the way characters like the Joker or honestly Bane, you know, Bane as a sumo wrestler, or the feudal lord versions of Penguin and Two-Face or whatever kind of lean into all this. Batman's just kind of there through all of it, which is a little bit disappointing. Then the Joker. Oh, the Joker. Tony Hale voices the Joker. Tony Hale of Arrested Development. And he sounds... I'm gonna say what he sounds like, and then I'm gonna explain what this is, because if you're not a theater geek, you might not know this reference. But he sounds like Rod from Avenue Q. And if you want to know what Rod from Avenue Q sounds like, Avenue Q is a stage play, on a Broadway show. I don't know if it's still on Broadway or not, but it's a stage musical, and it's a riff on Sesame Street. It's Sesame Street for adults, and it's got, puppets singing songs like Everyone's a Little Bit Racist. That's sort of their big famous one. The character of Rod is their riff on Bert. It's basically, imagine if Bert from Sesame Street was a closeted gay man. That's Rod, and that's what this Joker sounds like. And he just didn't work for me very well. Again, not helped by the dialogue. I have to wonder if they were... with the way that the translation was done, because this seemed a lot more pronounced. Because like I said, I did look at the subtitles translated directly from the Japanese just to compare a little bit, and I did get the sense that this was a much stronger vibe in the dubbed version versus the subtitles, which is I feel like they really leaned into the perceived campiness of like old kung fu movies, like 90s era anime. It seems like every other line is a character just saying another character's name with a question mark at the end of it. Joker? Batman? Two-Face? Harley Quinn? Like, that's the caliber of writing on display in the dub. And it's so prevalent that I have to think somebody at some level thought it was funny. They thought, like, look, this thing is so cheesy, because it is. It's very over-the-top anime cheesy. They decided to lean into the Western perception of just how cheesy that is. The problem is that stuff really only works if you don't treat it like it's a joke. Like, not to say there aren't joke moments. There are, but you can't treat the whole thing like it's a joke. I mean, to make the comparison again, Afro Samurai is preposterous and ridiculous and cheesy as hell, but it's also treated serious, which is part of why it's awesome. So, I watch something like this where it feels like the translation is really leaning on remember those old bad dubbed kung fu movies where the dialogue was all repetitive and redundant and kind of stupid? We'll do that. Like, I don't. And if they weren't trying to do that, then they were just half-assing the translation for the dub. So I don't know which is the case. I don't know which is worse. The end result, I can't tell the difference between one or the other, so it's a bad result either way. And so, this is cheesy fun, as I said. So, I mean, you've got samurais with Joker masks. You've got buildings transforming into giant robots. And those robots then proceeding to smack each other around. Yes, that is all there. But that stuff is best when it's not treated like how crazy is this? Which is how Westerners redubbing or translating this stuff tend to treat it. And it's not as interesting. It's not as fun. It's just not as entertaining when that kind of thing happens. And I really feel like it did with the dub. And I feel like it does a disservice to the movie because, like I said, visually the movie's a lot of fun. And I feel like it could have been a lot more fun if the translation on the dub wasn't making fun of it as it went along, or at least didn't feel like it did. Now that said, I don't want to oversell, taking away the voice and translation issues, because there's some weird things going on anyways. I'm not sure how much it added overall to have this be a time displacement story of Batman and all of his villains being sent to the past. as opposed to just doing it straight as an Elseworlds and having them just be there. And I do see, like, plot-wise, the way that decision impacts things, but at the end of the day, I don't think it actually adds much at all. So I'm not entirely sure why they chose to do that. I mean, I'll give credit for one thing. There's a really genuinely funny moment, and again, funny because there aren't any lines dubbed in and it's just allowed to happen and be funny, where Batman finds himself in the middle of this feudal Japanese village and he goes to hook shot away and he looks up and realizes there's no skyscrapers. The buildings are not tall enough for him to just hook and zip line away, completely away from where anybody can see him or grab him. And that's a silent moment. It's conveyed through the visuals, and that's funny. But, there are little moments like that, but I feel like it might have just been more fun to just really lean into the Elseworlds nature of this. I mean, look at it already. This doesn't look like it's in keeping with continuity. Why open up that possibility by having it be a time travel story? Just do a straight up Elseworlds. So I'm not entirely sure why that decision was made. And there are a lot of nitpicky things that I could go in. I'll just mention two. One is that there's a segment in the middle dealing with the Joker where the animation style changes. And it's kind of interesting, but I don't know what purpose it served. Not just the animation shift, but like the scene in and of itself. I don't know what purpose it served. I have to wonder if that's something that was inserted to get this thing to the runtime they needed, except this is an 85-minute runtime. Normally these things are 75, so this thing's already running long compared to what usually goes on with the DC animated films. So the other nitpick, and this is a true legitimate nitpick, they keep calling apes monkeys. And it drives me nuts. And it wouldn't drive me nuts except Gorilla Grodd does it too. He says his army of monkeys. They're not monkeys, they're apes. None of them have tails. Like, God, you want to talk about a setup for a joke? It should have been everyone else saying monkeys, and he gets pissed and yells at them saying, they're apes! That just bugged me. But, I mean, I at this point, I probably sound really down on the thing because I've been going through the stuff that doesn't really work. And unfortunately, if you're going to count it up, there is more stuff that I feel doesn't work than stuff that does. But I'm going to come back to one of the first things I said. I do think it's still worth watching for the visuals alone. It is visually a lot of fun. It is inventive. It's got nifty designs. It's got cool action. The question is whether or not that's enough for you. And for me, outside of the novelty of it and seeing it the once, that's not enough. Like, my favorites of these DC animated films, I buy. I want to watch again. I'm never going to need to see this again. I don't regret seeing it, to say that I've seen it and be like, there's some cool stuff there, but I don't ever need to see that one again. So those are my thoughts on Batman Ninja. Have you seen it? What do you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. You know the stuff that you can do. Like and subscribe and support me on Patreon. Buy a t-shirt. Follow me on Twitter. Send me an email. Send me stuff in the mail. I've got a P.O. box. Links for all that stuff and probably more that I didn't even mention is all down in the description. So until next time, this council is adjourned.